The Black Death ripped across the landscape, wiping out entire communities. Yorkshire was no exception. For the people of medieval England who experienced it, life was never the same again. Piers Mitchell lectures in biological anthropology at the University of Cambridge. He's studied how what we now know as bubonic plague spread throughout medieval Europe.
There are certain epidemic diseases like bubonic plague that many people would have never experienced until the epidemic swept through. And then virtually everyone would have been exposed to it, and a proportion of people would have died. For example, in the Black Death in 1348, perhaps 50–60% of people seem to have died in Europe.
Coping with such catastrophic losses must have been traumatic for the survivors, who had to rebuild their lives.
We have to remember that in medieval Europe, attitudes to death were somewhat different to what they are now. Religion was very important, and the place of the church was very important. So, although no one particularly wanted to die, there was a much stronger thought that what's important is that you live your life so you go to heaven when you do die. So, unlike today, there was less fear of death and more acceptance that it was going to happen. And people were taught by the church that what's important is when you did die, you'd lived a good enough life to go to heaven. And so there were slightly different attitudes to disease and different attitudes to death. You didn't necessarily have to be cured of a disease to have a good life, but so long as you prayed and ticked all the boxes from the point of view of the church, then it didn't matter if you died early, because if you went to heaven, that's what life was all about to the medieval mind.
The Black Death outbreak in the 14th century killed large numbers of people very quickly. Up to now, the only known evidence for mass deaths of this kind is from London. Could the comparatively small number of skeletons at Tadcaster also be a result of the plague?
The problem is we assume that the individuals from the Black Death were buried in massive pits. Well, a lot of that wouldn't have been possible in normal churchyards. They were usually packed with remains, so it's likely that a lot of these plague pits were actually not in consecrated ground, or were in ground that was later consecrated. And I'm sure there have been assemblages found in Britain where the assumption has been that they are plague cemeteries, but it hasn't been proven.
Marlin set about finding how to verify whether the woman had died from Black Death, and a recent discovery in bioarchaeology provided the means to do so. DNA analysis techniques have developed dramatically in recent decades. Caused by the Yersinia pestis bacteria and transmitted to humans by the fleas of infected rodents, bubonic plague, or Black Death, is a pathogenic killer. Though Yersinia pestis was discovered in 1894, its genome has only recently been decoded. This genomic sequence now allows scientists to pinpoint the existence of bubonic plague in the intact DNA of ancient skeletons. Michelle Mundy is an expert on analysing the biomolecular structure of archaeological specimens.
When we have a skeleton and we can look at it morphologically, we can say certain things about it, and then if you want to get down to the molecular level and look at DNA, what we can look at different genes. We can say, more or less what colour eyes someone might have had in the past. We can look at skin tone. We can look at things like whether they had runny earwax or not. These are all genes that we know what they do, so that we can look for them. We can look for the genetic changes that cause these particular features to arise in your body. All of these things will tell us something about a person in the past. They might not have actually manifested them completely, so we might be able to say this person has the gene for this, but we don't know how much that was actually manifested in their actual life. I don't think we'll ever definitely get to that. There's a difference between what's in our genetics and what we actually did throughout life. So a lot of what we look like and our personalities is, you know, as you know, half about what's in our genes and what's in our lifestyle, how we've been brought up.